I believe that when I first came upon the idea of this holy day, the Feast of All Saints, I was given the impression that this was meant to be a day that we would commemorate the great men and women who were sainted, canonized by the Church. And that seemed reasonable to me. So I tried to kind of identify a bit with them, and I found that very difficult to do. Most of the men I found were priests, and that didn't help me identify with them, quite frankly. And so the feast day, the holy day, really held very little, if any, significance for me at all. And then I was introduced to the concept that maybe there was another way to look at this feast day. Think of the men and women in your own life who, although they were never canonized, they played a very significant role in your life. They were saintly to you, and that helped. As a result of that, suddenly the feast day made sense, and I began to think about those people. I think we have a great tendency to mistakenly define the word saint. Oftentimes you'll hear someone, as they're speaking and talking about maybe some mistake they made, and to kind of explain it or condone it, they will say, well, after all, I'm no saint. And the implication is that they think of a saint as someone who's either perfect or nearly so. And we know from the study of Scripture that the saints, certainly the apostles, who were all sainted, all canonized, certainly were not perfect. How many times did they make mistakes regarding Jesus? Peter denied him. Others walked away. Others just couldn't fathom his real mission. They were not perfect people, but Jesus made them who they became, saints, by his will. And in the end, of course, they came through for him. So maybe we need to redefine the word saint. I've heard it referred to as ordinary people doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way. And maybe that would help us. It doesn't have to be in a perfect way, but do some things very, very well. And personally, have an influence in our life. It could be certainly a parent, certainly a grandparent, perhaps an aunt or uncle. It could be a teacher at some point in our life. It could even be a neighbor. But hopefully, as I've been talking in the last few seconds, a person has come to mind that played a significant role to this point anyway, in your life, made a difference. Maybe didn't turn your life around, but really significantly influenced your life for the better. That might well be the saint in your life. And I think it's important that we not only reminisce about that role, but we share that role that they played with us, with others in our life, especially our children and grandchildren. And that's one of the things that I hope to do as time goes on. In my own life, I'm thinking of my grandfather, my mother's father. I think he played a significant role in my life for two reasons. One was proximity, and the second was just a happenstance, a coincidence, a psychological reason. The psychological reason is that my grandfather had 3 daughters, one of whom was my mother. His first grandchild was a girl, and he didn't have another granddaughter again. That was it. So he had, if you will, 4 girls, three daughters and a granddaughter, and then he had 7 grandsons. The key here is I was the first. So I was the son he never had. And the proximity was he lived next door. Now, it can't get any better than that. So I spent an enormous number of years in the beginning of my life with my grandfather. My father worked, my mother had a part-time job, and then I had a younger brother who came along. So it was very easy for me to go next door and be with Grandpa. And he had a farm. What could be better than that? He had a dairy farm, and I used to go with him to bring the milk every morning. I called it the cocoa, for obvious reasons. And as a result, my grandfather became more and more a role model in my life. He taught me many things. He taught me how to drive. I could drive when I was 14 because I drove all over the farm. He taught me how to hit a golf ball. I didn't do it very well, but that wasn't Grandpa's fault. And he taught me something else that was very valuable. He preached to me the gospel. Now, if he were alive today and he heard me say that, he would be dumbfounded, because I don't think my grandfather ever read a word of Scripture. And outside of a few weddings, I don't think he ever set foot in a church. So how did he preach the gospel to me? He did it the way St. Francis said we should do it. And many of you know the phrase. St. Francis said, preach the gospel with all your might, and if you must, use words. And that's what my grandfather did. He taught me how to treat people. To everyone else, Grandpa was consistent. He treated everyone, and I watched him do it. He treated everyone with kindness, with respect, and with a smile on his face. And I watched him, and I think I learned. And I attribute whatever skills I have with people to my grandfather. One of the things that I remember reading, a famous book several years ago, and the book was entitled, "The Important Things I Learned in Life I Learned in Kindergarten." Well, I didn't go to kindergarten. They didn't even have it in the school I went to at that time. I'm old, remember. But I had a kindergarten teacher, my grandfather. So my goal in the next several years of my life is to be, to my grandchildren, a little closer like the grandfather that I had.